So let's pick up now. We've got to the point now through the discussion is that in the face of the narrow, broad agreement, disagreement, and all that, then Ion's Homer techne, right? His Ion's Homer techne. How could it just be limited to Homer? That doesn't seem to make sense, right? But again, it is, but it doesn't seem to fit the way we're talking about techne. That's kind of the clue, like that there seems to be some funniness in this discussion. So, because perhaps in the end, Ion's Homer technique really is a general poetic technique. Like, you talk about all the poets. It's just not for Homer. Socrates keeps saying that, the skill you think you have with Homer, actually it should apply to all these others. And look, I'm giving you these rational arguments that you want to contain your skill to Homer or your techne or whatever you want to call it. This ability only applies to Homer, but it should apply broader than Homer. And again, Ion says, no, I'm a Homer specialist. That was kind of weird, but what you just did, but I'm still a Homer specialist. And maybe I'm a Homer specialist in the sense that, and I put in quotation marks, scare quotes, that I know Homer, says Ion, because Homer's just better, okay? Maybe that's what my Homer techne is all about, is I latch on or something. I'm just about, I can only read the best, right? Something like that. A little grasping at straws. But so in other words, he's still trying to maintain that his ability, his, Homer techne is just that. It's limited to Homer. And Socrates keeps pushing it where he should be he shouldn't be so limited. He should be able to handle all the other poets. And so it's now, no, you don't have a Homer techne, you have a poetic techne. And Ion is saying, no, I only know Homer, maybe because he's just the best. And that's, that's a little bit of an ego boost for Ion, right? I'm the best and I only study the best, or something like that. Well, Socrates, okay, and he shifts this discussion a little. And now instead of talking about, agreements and disagreements, about same subject and different subject, he'll now talk about it maybe in a more kind of a qualitative way, like better and worse about the same subject. Since you brought up this, well, I just do the best, and I can only handle the best. I can't handle anything that's bad. Well, Socrates says, okay, does that make any sense? And eventually Socrates is going to say, that doesn't make any sense either. So he brings up a couple of examples. And he says, think about the subjects like arithmetic and medicine. And you have people saying things about arithmetic or saying things about medicine. And Socrates says, wouldn't it be, typically the case, you find people talking about the subject, let's confine it to arithmetic. You find a lot of people talking about arithmetic, and then you're going to find someone who's able to say things like, oh yeah, what that guy, what he's saying is nonsense. The stuff he's saying about arithmetic, he really doesn't know what he's talking about. Or it's okay, but it's pretty shoddy. But what she's saying is great. She knows her stuff. And then in the other thing, what she's saying, another person, what she's saying about medicine is no good. And what that other person is saying is much better. The person that can make those judgments, right, between, better and worse in an area like a single subject, like arithmetic, that's basically a mathematician, right? So Socrates says, so the mathematician picks out the good from the bad speakers. And the same thing in medicine, well, that would be a doctor who does that. Again, it would be a little odd if someone said, I'm a mathematician and I can recognize good mathematical statements, true mathematical statements, excellent mathematical statements. But if you put a mathematical statement in front of me that isn't excellent or good, I wouldn't know what to do with it. That seems very counterintuitive. Maybe it's not, but it certainly seems counterintuitive. Socrates is going to try and unpack why that's counterintuitive, or why intuitively you would think that there'd be a kind of symmetry. Again, when you can handle agreement, you can handle disagreement. Another symmetry. When you can handle where the good speakers are, you can also say where the bad speakers are in a given subject. Now, you may be a specialist, that you might be a doctor, and you'd say, look, talk about medicine, I can pick out the good and the bad speakers. But if I'm sitting here as a doctor and you're talking about arithmetic, I'm not very good at arithmetic, so I wouldn't know. I'm going to my buddy over here, she's good at arithmetic. She can pick that out. I do medicine. So in that sense, we're starting to get an intuition of, oh, okay, sort of in a subject, there's some kind of coherency that if you know right, the good and the best and all that, you kind of know what's along the shall we say, like kind of like the spectrum, the good and the bad. Um, and this sort of what we would also say, just as an aside, this isn't in the dialogue, but wouldn't it be odd to say that someone is a good person, but they only know good, they only know moral things, they don't know any immoral things, they can't tell right from wrong? But isn't that one of our basic ideas about being a moral person? Is we always say, or when we say someone is immoral, we say, well, that guy can't tell right from wrong, right? If you said to someone, I can't tell right from wrong, they wouldn't say, oh, well, so you only know the good, therefore you're a good person. No, most people would say that's kind of odd. You got a problem here. There's something to be solved here if you can't distinguish right from wrong. So these kinds of symmetries in knowledge seem to show up here. So what's the point? Well, these symmetries and this general sort of aspect keeps coming back. But remember, Ian keeps saying, I'm a specialist, I'm limited, I shouldn't have these symmetries, I shouldn't have this generalist. This is counter to everything that I stand for as a rhapsode. At least his own image of himself as a rhapsode being. Again, I only have this Homer technique. So what again is this Homer technique going to be? It just doesn't seem to fit any of this. And so we're back again. Homer or Ion tried it again, but it seems that this unique Homer technique doesn't work. Again, it seems to be pushing back towards this. No, you have a general a poet technique. All right, so that takes us to the end of this section. So this here, so Ian is like very frustrated by this point, right? He's not so happy anymore. He's like, this dialogue started off as fun, and I don't like where this has gone at all. So and you can understand, right? He's got this image of himself as this Homer specialist, and he's grudgingly been shoved into the position where he has to admit he knows other ones, and like he has to even admit he knows the lesser poets. You can understand why he doesn't like this at all, right? But the logic of the situation keeps forcing him. So if you want to say you have a techne, right, like a kind of profession and a skill or whatever, which would imply that maybe other people can learn it. It implies all kinds of things. And Socrates is sort of unearthing all the stuff that implies, and that seems to fly in the face again. As Ion even says, this just flies in the face of everything, right? As Ion says, around the start of 532a, around I think 532b-ish around, Ion says, something like this. He says, okay, after all this, he said, wait a second, how can you explain these facts with this, this flies in the face of everything. He says something like this, how do you, you say, so Socrates says, yes, you should be equally clever about Homer, and the Ion should be equally clever about Homer and the other poets. You agree that you will be, the same person will be an adequate judge of all who speak on the same subjects, and poets basically speak on the same subjects, right? They talk about war and love and peace and the gods and all kinds of things. So you can't really just be a specialist on one poet. You basically be a specialist on them all, right? Because they all talk about the same thing. So again, all those symmetries show up if you think of yourself as having this technique. And then Ion just kind of gets a little upset here. And he's like, how in the world do you explain what I do, Socrates? And he lays it out quite nicely. When someone discusses another poet, I pay no attention. So in other words, Ion is saying, if someone talks about Hesiod, I don't pay any attention. I'm not interested. And also, I have no power to contribute anything worthwhile. I don't get behind Hesiod's work. I get behind Homer's work to the deep meaning. I don't get to the deep meaning of Hesiod. At least he's admitting implicitly that Hesiod has deep meaning. So he's kind of retracted a little bit about the better, worse thing. What does he say? I simply doze off, right? if you start, you know, I was like, if you start talking about Hesiod, I have nothing to say, and I'm not interested. It doesn't nothing. Well, why isn't, you know, like it's kind of it's interesting that he brings up the notion, sort of like I doze off, right? Like you're bored. It doesn't attract you, and we can admit that there are things that are all kinds, like other people are interested in things that don't interest us. Like, sure, you know, some people are interested in stuff, but, you know, for me, nah, it's not my cup of tea, right? You know, just a little kind of colloquialism or a metaphor implying that, yeah, it could be very interesting and it could be an interesting cup of tea, but not for me. So, but then Ion says, if someone does, you know, stop talking about that old, boring old Hesiod, and you start talking about Homer, and Ion is like, I'm there. I'm awake. I'm interested. I'm contributing. I'm paying attention, and I have plenty to say. All right. So what does Socrates say to that? He says, oh, that's not hard to figure out, my friend. If it's that, anyone can tell that you're powerless to speak about Homer on the basis of knowledge, right? It's really not this kind of notion of knowledge or mastery, right? Implying, you know, something that's, you know, maybe something that's objective, right? It's a skill which we can teach others. It's a set of criteria or knowledge which we can teach others. That's not how you do it, says Socrates. If it came and again, he reiterates, if you're this ability, if you're what you're calling your Homer techne really were a techne and it came about by skill and mastery and all that stuff, you'd be able to talk about the other poets, and yeah, you can't. I've led you down where you think that the logic of the situation, where you agree the logic of the situation led to you should be able to talk about other poets. You can't. Something went wrong way at the beginning, and it clearly is that what you thought was a kind of techne mastery, knowledge, skill, that probably just wasn't right. And so you've got something like you know, an inspiration or something different. All right, so we've got that out of the way, but Socrates is going to then spend some more time analyzing what I've called these kinds of symmetries and looking into that. But, you know, he's put forward this idea that, well, yeah, Ion, it seems that you've got something different. But Socrates will go and talk more about poetry in general, and I'll pick that up a little later. See you next video.